Welcome in. Time for our 49ers daily update. Making it through the dead portion of the offseason. Still a long ways to go, but it is Thursday of this week. We are over a week removed from the end of the 49ers spring program. The daily update today, well, we'll focus on Dominick Puni, new 49ers offensive lineman. It's the piece I wrote in a little bit, but I guess we have to repeat it because Chris Sims just said that Jordan Love would have won the Super Bowl if he was the 49ers quarterback last year. I mean, it's very, very clear that Brock Purdy is a better QB than Jordan Love. If you need data to showcase this, I have the data for you. The data can be found right on the screen here. You could see Brock Purdy and his efficiency way at the very top relative to pass protection. So his pass protection was a lot worse than Jordan Love's, who's over here, who's a good quarterback who had a heater at the end of last season. I mean, it was a 6-7 game stretch where Jordan Love was really good, but he wasn't Purdy. And the tape will tell you that it wasn't Purdy. And a look at the NFC divisional playoff game will tell you that he wasn't Purdy. Brock Purdy won that game for the 49ers. Led a game-winning drive, overcame a shaky start, made some big-time throws. Still remember the one to Chris Conley on the corner pass. And then, of course, he delivered the scramble that set up the touchdown for Christian McCaffrey. But there was a deep throw to George Kittle. That was a touchdown earlier in that game. Jordan Love made throws that lost Green Bay that game. He emulated Brett Favre against the New Orleans Saints with the crossbody throw when Green Bay only needed a field goal. That was inexcusable. I can't imagine what the media would be saying about Brock Purdy if Purdy were the one to make that bad of a throw in crunch time. It was Jordan Love who made that bad of a throw in crunch time, yet he's getting every single excuse in the world. And, you know, a lot of people have opinions. I think that people react a little bit more to Chris Sims because he's one of Kyle Shanahan's good friends back from college in Texas. So when that's the case, then people think that this might have a little bit more of a tie to the 49ers, whatever, or what they might think, or maybe Chris Sims is trying to devalue Brock Purdy's stock ahead of a contract year. I just think it's hot air. I just think that you follow any bit of film and any bit of data. What Brock Purdy has done over his first season and a half in the league has been historically good. You can see how awesome he was there with this is efficiency on the Y. The X-axis is about pass protection. You can see how damn good he was, even considering the fact that he was playing with pass protection that wasn't great. Packers had a stable of really good receivers as well, by the way, in case people wanted to discredit Purdy that way. But I think it's just so much hot air surrounding Brock Purdy. I think that his name sells clicks. So people will say whatever. I don't care if it was Chris Sims saying it or if it was one of the many other people saying it, but they are living in a world that doesn't have anything to do with reality if they're trying to say that quarterbacks like Jordan Love are better than Brock Purdy. Love has been in the league since 2020, by the way. Purdy's only been in the league since 2022. So, hey, Jordan Love, maybe he'll continue developing. Maybe he'll show more consistency because obviously we didn't see that from him over the course of a full season last year. Maybe Brock Purdy will regress. Maybe we'll look at things differently. I don't think any of those things are going to happen. I think that everything is pointing toward Brock Purdy staying an elite quarterback in this league based on his mental makeup, based on what he's done. But based on the body of work that is out there so far, I just keep on showing this because this is all you need to show people. Brock Purdy is better than somebody like Jordan Love. And it couldn't have been more obvious in the smaller sample of the NFC Championship game. You know, I hate people who, they talk about hypothetical interceptions. Oh, he should have thrown an interception here versus actual interceptions. So I think that we should punish quarterbacks more for throwing actual interceptions than we should for hypothetical interceptions. Because the amount of hypotheticals regarding Brock Purdy is humorlessly long at this point. Seems like every single week somebody comes up with a new hypothetical. Oh, if Purdy were in this system, then it would be worse. If Purdy had thrown this pass 2 inches lower, that would have been intercepted. I mean, at a certain point, and it should be at the first hypothetical because this is a league of reality. It's about what do you actually do? How do you actually perform? Where does the efficiency actually lie? But at some point, even if it's not at the first hypothetical, it should be after the second or third one. You can't just keep on running hypotheticals out there to discredit somebody. At some point, reality matters. And the reality is that he probably should have won the MVP last year. You could argue credibly, I think, for Christian McCaffrey as well, but was an MVP finalist. That's an objective truth. That was based on his resume as a quarterback. His resume is best quantified by something like this. He's excellent throwing deep. I mean, I could run through the gamut of statistics right now if you want. We went over, when I had Brad Graham on yesterday, we went over the play action stats. Brock Purdy was at the top of the league, 77% of his passes completed there. But highest deep pass completion percentage on record, that's 20 yards or more through the air. That was close to 65% for most of the season, ended up just above 60% for Brock Purdy. Best intermediate yards per attempt, that is on throws from 10 to 20 air yards downfield. We've never seen intermediate efficiency like what Brock Purdy showed last year. Very low sack rate, very low pressure to sack rate. He gets away from pressure because he's got that great burst. He was a top 5 scrambler in the league last season. I feel that everything that people think that Jordan Love is, the people that don't watch the game, Brock Purdy actually does better. And you saw that in the NFC divisional game. Sorry if I called it the championship game earlier. That was against Detroit. That opens up a whole other can of worms. Then you have people that are trying to say, oh, Jared Goff, yeah, he's a cut above Brock Purdy. In what way? Like, there is no facet of the game in which Goff is better than Purdy. In fact, every single one probably belongs to Purdy, including the ability to throw a deep out pattern, which is one of the most important tough throws in football that requires arm strength. I mean, Purdy's timing and ability to zip in a deep out pattern is on par with guys like Jared Goff. Just because somebody was the number one pick and he was 6'4", 6'5", however tall he was. Hey, I'm 6'5", so I'm not going to be biased against 6'5" people. But just because he was 6'5" doesn't mean that he's automatically a more gifted football player than somebody who was picked number 262. That's what the Brock Purdy story has told us, that being a football player is more than just a height weight measurement. Just watch the tape, watch him make the throws, watch him run, watch the 10-yard split that we talk about from Brock Purdy. So I just had to address that because we're at that point of the offseason where we're going to get these takes being recycled over and over and over again. And maybe every time I see one of those takes, I should just quote tweet it here. Brock Purdy, far and above. And this, you don't score this high efficiency wise unless you're doing a lot right as a quarterback. We're looking for quantitative metrics to see how good a quarterback is, to take as much bias out of it as possible. And that's where Brock Purdy stands. We got some NFL news today. Atlanta punished. They lost a 5th-round pick for tampering with Charlie Werner, which is funny. 49ers tight end who signed with the Falcons. I'm going to open up the news report from this morning. This is from Ian Rappaport. We'll read it right now. The Falcons lost a 2025 5th-round pick for violating the anti-tampering policy with Kirk Cousins, Darnell Mooney, and Charlie Werner. Atlanta was fined $250,000 and GM Terry Fontenot was fined $50,000. So essentially, I think they got caught tampering with Charlie Werner because of the high-profile nature of the Kirk Cousins situation. There's a 2-day window starting in March, mid-March, right before free agency officially opens on Wednesday. So it's Monday and Tuesday. It's called the legal tampering period, where you can tamper, but that means you can talk to a player's agent and, you could be negotiating and setting things up. But you can't formally meet with the player until the tampering window ends and you actually can sign the guy. And that's on Wednesday. Apparently, and there was plenty of evidence on this because I think that a lot of teams do this, but the most high-profile case was Atlanta signing Kirk Cousins, and there was evidence that they had met with Kirk Cousins before the tampering window had closed, and because of that, there was a lot of scrutiny on Atlanta, and in the league's investigation, it was found that Charlie Werner, the former 49ers tight end who signed with the Falcons for $12 million, had also been tampered with. So just a little side note, 49ers don't get any compensation or anything. I don't know how competitive they were with the Falcons in bidding for Charlie Werner, but the Falcons are docked a 5th round draft pick. All right. So I promised the 49ers intel with Dominick Puni. This is going to be the gist of the discussion. Wanted to let the room build up, let people argue about Brock Purdy and Jordan Love. And we can talk about Dominick Puni, the 49ers offensive lineman out of Kansas. I have the link to this piece, which is up on The Athletic. It is in the description, so you can go ahead and check it out and subscribe. But I talked to Lance Leopold on the phone. Lance Leopold is Kansas's head coach. So he was the guy who recruited Puni from Central Missouri. That was a D2 school to FBS D1 Kansas. He saw the 2 years of Dominick Puni playing multiple positions along the offensive line, and he didn't see Puni give up a single sack in those 2 years. But most importantly, he oversaw the leap from the Division II level to Kansas. And guess what? Puni's going to have to make a leap now from the college football level to the NFL. He's already proven that he can make one big leap very successfully, as he didn't give up a sack over those 2 seasons for the Jayhawks. And because of that, I think there's a lot of optimism that Dominick Puni can make the leap from college to the NFL. Some of the stuff that Leopold told me was really interesting. There is some intel here that we hadn't yet heard. And one of the things was a lot of people thought that the first time Puni had practiced at center was the Senior Bowl. It actually wasn't true. Kansas's top 2 centers went down in a recent spring game, I think probably before Puni's senior year. And that was right prior to the spring game. They lost their backup on top of the starter. Puni raised his hand, volunteered, and said, "Coach, I could play center." And without much preparation at all, he played center throughout the entire spring game. The reason I bring this up is because the 49ers are very bullish on Puni's ability to play all 5 positions on the offensive line. They think that he can play anywhere from left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, and right tackle. I think he's initially going to be competing most realistically for the right guard spot, because that's what the 49ers may have the most acute early need for competition. But ultimately, you can see this guy expand into the tackle position or even the center position based on that story from Lance Leopold. We can also open up Dominick Puni's spider chart here, because you'll see why there's such a balanced, the balanced profile here is what has, I think, really encouraged people to look at Dominick Puni as a guy who can play anywhere. He's got good height, 6'5". Again, I'm not biased toward 6'5" guys. Dominick Puni is one of us. Broad jump, really good broad jump, especially at the good height. He's able to get out 107 inches. That is 78th percentile. Good vertical for Dominick Puni, 30 inches. Good hand size, decent arm length. And I think that arm length, it's slightly above average, but because it's 33 and 3/8 inches. It's, some tackles well above 34, 35, some even 36-inch arms. That's, you want that real length on the outside. Once the arms get shorter, you start thinking more about a guy as a guard. But with everything else good, including the wingspan being really nice, 81-inch wingspan, you look at Dominick Puni and you say, wow, those are good starter measurables. And you have more on top of those, with the 3-cone drill being 4-4-0. And I actually wrote about that 3-cone a couple months ago. And this was something that the 49ers seem to be emphasizing this offseason. I asked Chris Foerster, the 49ers offensive line coach, if that was something that San Francisco was indeed emphasizing. And he actually said that did I say 3-cone? Puni's 3-cone was really good. The short shuttle was really good. I'm looking up the wrong thing right now. That's why I couldn't find it. The short shuttle was 4-4-0, but Chris Foerster told me that the 49ers actually look at 3-cone a little bit more. That being said, the 3-cone times of all of the 49ers offensive linemen were really good as well. Here's the article that I wrote. Dominick Puni, Jared Kingston, and the 49ers O-line focus on the short shuttle. It's something that Kyle Shanahan actually mentioned right after the draft. Chris Furster, when I asked him about it, talked a little bit more about the 3-cone. But all 4 added 49ers offensive linemen from this offseason scored well in the short shuttle, with Puni having the fastest short shuttle of 4.40. Now, what that will tell you is your ability to move from left to right very quickly, and that's obviously really important if a defensive lineman, a pass rusher, is trying to cross your face. It also will probably give you a good gauge of a lineman's athleticism to get up to the second level on some of these reach blocks that the 49ers ask for in the run game. The one most fascinating thing about Dominick Puni, I think, just overarching evaluation, is that the 49ers are already firmly talking about him as a better pass blocker than a run blocker. So the 49ers up until this season had very obviously prioritized run blocking over pass protection. Well, the pass protection, as we've seen with our graphic regarding Brock Purdy, was not very good. Brock Purdy's dot wouldn't be very far to the left here unless the pass protection was lacking. It was ranked in the 20s for the 49ers. X-axis is team pass block grade. You obviously want to protect Brock Purdy being an elite quarterback, being somebody that you plan to pay next offseason, but you also want to make him better. Just imagine how much higher up on this chart Brock Purdy could be on the y-axis if his dot was further to the right on the x-axis with better pass protection. You could see there's a correlation between where you are on the y-axis with your pass protection and where you are on the y-axis with your efficiency and where you are on the x-axis with your pass protection. So in that spirit, the 49ers turned to drafting an offensive lineman in Dominick Puni, who they think is a more developed pass blocker at this point of his career, early on, obviously as a rookie, than he is a run blocker, which is a change in philosophy for the 49ers. The short shuttle 4.40 from Dominick Puni, truly an elite time in the short shuttle, especially for a guy of his size. The short shuttle, I think, is something that might directly correlate to his pass protection abilities, because you've got so many quick interior defensive linemen in the NFL these days. That's a story of the league. I think Aaron Donald might have been one of the players that really spurred that along. Not big. Donald might have been down at 280, which would have been unheard of 20, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago, along the defensive line in the middle. But he decided to be lighter because that made him quicker. That allowed him to beat guards with his athleticism. The quick interior defensive lineman has become the bane of offenses around the league and quarterbacks around the league, and especially the bane of interior offensive linemen around the league, because they haven't been athletic enough to shuffle in front of him and block him. So the key is to find interior offensive linemen who can match the athleticism of these elite, really, really quick interior defensive linemen in the NFL. And for that reason, I mean, the big study about the short shuttle and how it's so correlated with success at the NFL level, finding guys out of the draft that succeed, I think it's because the short shuttle shows us who's quick enough to block some of these quick defensive tackles. I can read you really quickly what Josh Norris, who studies some of this stuff, found regarding the short shuttle. Underdog Fantasy's Josh Norris has studied various combine tests and their predictive power for any given player's chances in the league. Before the 2023 combine, Norris reported that just 28 offensive linemen had run short shuttle times of 4.47 seconds or faster at the combine, and that 24 of them had been drafted, 24 of 28. Those 24 players, Norris found, went on to start 84% of their NFL games. So before this past season, running under a 4.47 was extremely rare. Just this past season, there was just one lineman under 4.47 seconds. You know, the 2023 combine produced just one under 4.47. 2024 produced 6, 2 of whom were drafted by the 49ers. One of them was Dominick Puni, 4.40. The other one was Jarrett Kingston, who I think was right under 4.47 or right at it at 4.47. Then you had Bryson Mays and Drake Nugent, both of whom also ran fast short shuttles, and those were undrafted free agents. So obviously the 49ers like quick linemen. And a lot of people think that quickness along the offensive line relates only to run blocking and getting to the second level. But as I just explained, with how quick those defensive tackles are on the inside, quickness is just as important for pass blocking. And if the 49ers are going to fix some of their biggest issues, which I think lie in the realm of pass protection on the inside, they've got to up the quickness in there. Jake Brendel is really quick. I don't think he has a trouble beating defenders to the spot, but he might be a little bit light. So he loses against some of the bull rushes. He loses against some of the power rushes at the point of attack. Meanwhile, Aaron Banks and Spencer Burford, both of whom started the season for the 49ers last year at the guard positions, neither of those two guys ran fast short shuttles. So both of those guys, I do think we are prone to get beaten by really, really good quickness. In Dominick Puni's case, didn't give up a single sack at Kansas. It's obviously going to be different doing it at the NFL level, but I think that the 49ers are targeting this pick directly toward the fast interior lineman in the NFL. And then, I met Dominick Puni. You see him up on the screen there. I've told this story a few times already. Shook his hand, and I thought, well, this guy has the body type to play right away. I'll meet a lot of rookies at various positions, especially offensive line. And I'll think, okay, this guy's going to need a few months or a year in an NFL weight room and in an NFL training program. You have to rework the body. It's a different level of competition. In the case of Dominick Puni, I didn't think that. I said, wow, this guy has reworked his body already. And I asked Lance Leopold, Kansas's coach, about that. And Lance Leopold said that the summer in between Central Missouri and Kansas was extremely, extremely important for Dominick Puni, and he took full advantage of that. He came into Kansas ready to go. Obviously, then he got access to better nutrition at Kansas than he had at D2, probably a more competitive strength program. You just have more resources in Division I football. And at this point, he's got that 6'5" height. He's over 300 pounds, but there's not a whole lot of extra fat in that weight. He's got a lot of functional weight, which the 49ers should really like. Lance Leopold, by the way, he's turned Kansas's program around. They're fresh off of a bowl game. His first season, they went 2-10. That was before Dominick Puni arrived at Kansas. So Puni was a big part of a program turnaround, which means he's a winner. It's the kind of guy that the 49ers like to have in the locker room for cultural reasons, right? You just want somebody who's been around a team that knows how to win. And he was one of the variables that changed for Kansas once they turned from a losing team to a winning team. But Leopold, the coach who has orchestrated this turnaround, his first year at Kansas when they were still bad, they played Brock Purdy and Iowa State. And Lance Leopold got a preview of this right here. Lance Leopold said, I think they lost by 40 points, Kansas did, to Brock Purdy's team. Brock Purdy threw 4 touchdowns in the first quarter against Kansas before the Jayhawks turned that around. This was, again, before Puni showed up on campus. And Leopold is really excited for Purdy because it's a Big Ten quarterback. He's obviously supporting the conference, but he said that even then you saw some of the playmaking ability. Purdy was a dude by that point in his college career, his senior season at Iowa State. So anyway, Leopold had insight on both Purdy and Dominick Puni, which is why you should read this type of stuff in Athletic. It's an exclusive one-on-one conversation with a really good coach, a really good college coach, a head coach in Lance Leopold, who talks about Dominick Puni, his dad, his brothers, talks about Brock Purdy, talks about how Purdy and Puni are now going to be on the same team in the NFL with the 49ers. And Leopold thinks that the 49ers did get a good one. We'll see as far as Puni's physicality, ability to play immediately. All that stuff is going to be determined in July and August over the course of training camp. But if you want to see how he might potentially fit, there's a lot of moving pieces. Amongst those moving pieces, I do see opportunity. This is the 49ers offensive line. I think I might I can't really make the shuffle in real time because right now I don't know if Jake Brendel is going to be the guy at center for sure. He's dealing with a knee tendonitis. John Feliciano was the first teamer there over the course of the spring. When Feliciano was out, we saw Ben Barch in that spot. But if Feliciano does end up at center, there's every chance that Puni is competing with Spencer Burford and somebody like Ben Barch for the right guard position. Right now, I have Burford because he began last season as the first string guy at right guard. I have him slotted in as right guard. But he might not be that second team right guard if the 49ers have Puni beat him in a competition, which is entirely possible, or if Ben Barch moves into the fray. So they have bodies that create intrigue. Drake Kingston will also throw his name into the ring, the 6th round pick. Drake Nugent and Bryson Mays, those are 2 undrafted centers that that this may be more of a long-term proposition for those guys, but who knows? You never know in the NFL. Purdy obviously defied odds in his first year. To me, it really looks like the 49ers are supremely interested in adding at center and improving center, whether it be this year or in coming seasons. I think they realize that position has to be better. Under Shanahan, it's always been a premium position. And Brendel, I think, took a little bit of a step back last year. And it's obvious to anyone in the world that right guard has got to get better. Right tackle, it's not so easy to find a tackle that's going to give you an improvement over Colton McKivitz. You probably have to have a high first-round draft pick to do that. The 49ers didn't. Instead, they're insulating the swing tackle spots. Maybe they take a swing at a tackle in next year's draft. It just depends. They don't typically have a high draft pick. They haven't had one here in a few years now. So improving right tackle is something that's probably going to have to come from within, from Colton McKivitz's own improvement. But right guard, I think that they see a chance at immediate improvement. And Dominick Puni is one of the reasons why. So Dominick Puni is who you should read about today, because we have that big piece about him. So go ahead and sign up for that. It's going to be in the description. Mike dropped it in there. We're 27 minutes in. That's almost 30 minutes in. That means we can move to 49ers Q&A. Ben Barch was practicing at center. I think you're asking about center. That was after both Brendel and Feliciano were unavailable. Yes, it's about IQ, not just all muscle in the trenches, especially at that center position, because that's the guy that's calling out the protections. He's identifying the defensive. He's identifying rotations from the safeties. He's calling out the assignments for the offensive line. He's really part of the brain trust along with the quarterback. But even last year, it was a mental mistake that really cost them from Spencer Burford at that right guard position. So it's not just center that has to think about this kind of stuff. It is a cerebral game for all of the positions. Why do people hate on Purdy? Your guess is as good as mine. I think I go back to Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually the correct one. And in the case of Occam's razor, Brock Purdy generates a lot of interest. People always want to watch the videos. People always want to click on the tweets. People always want to interact with whatever social media post you put out there, because he is pick number 262 that has moved to MVP finalist status. That's a hell of a story, and great stories gain a lot of traction. So people like to create a lot of debate surrounding that. Now, there could be more nefarious reasons. You could talk about those amongst yourselves. I don't have any firm evidence for those, but I do know that Brock Purdy is a lightning rod as far as generating ratings, generating clicks. And I think that people are just trying to surf that wave. Any hints toward Brock Purdy being given more trust to audible plays and block schemes this year? Maybe more audible trust, but I don't think he's going to be given the full responsibility of the center position to start identifying what centers are doing and setting blocking schemes. In other offenses, that is the case. Kyle Shanahan's just never done that. Even with his most efficient quarterback prior to last year, Matt Ryan in 2016, there was still a lot on the center. And guess who the center was for Matt Ryan in 2016? It was Alex Mack, who the 49ers signed for 2021. They actually thought they were going to have Mack for 3 seasons, or hoped that they would, but he retired. after that 2021 season. So they've had Brendel for the last two. The center is obviously really important to Kyle Shanahan, and it does illustrate how much cerebrally is put on that offensive line. As far as what Purdy is going to be asked to handle, well, I mean, you're already asked to handle a lot just by virtue of being a quarterback in the NFL. You have to digest the whole offense. I think maybe a little bit more audible power does make sense, but I don't think he's going to be taking away center's duties up at the line of scrimmage. Do I think this is Elijah Mitchell's last year with San Francisco? It's his last year under contract. So I don't know how he's going to perform if he stays healthy, what rate the 49ers would be able to get him back at. They typically only extend A-listers, and then they try to replace the B-list positions, such as running back 2, through the draft because it's more cost efficient. So in all likelihood, this is probably it for Elijah Mitchell, unless they can get him back on a really cheap injury flyer. And you would hope that's not the case. You hope that Elijah stays healthy this time around. But I think that the writing is in the past for the 49ers, right? We've seen what San Francisco has done in the past regarding how they approach contracts, and they look at the A-list status, the B-list status, and they try to insulate depth of their team using the most cost-efficient paths possible, and that is typically the rookie contract through the NFL draft. Mike thinks that Mitchell might be an in-season trade. I wouldn't rule that out, but I just don't think that we know what the situation midseason is going to be. If they're stocked at running back with healthy bodies around midseason, sure, this can go the way of Jeff Wilson Jr. or Matt Breida. That's a 5th-round pick coming back to the 49ers. But you can't predetermine that because you don't know where they're going to be. And let's be honest, that backup running back position is a really, really important one in the context of the 49ers offense. And Elijah Mitchell, when he's been healthy, has been a really good player. He could be a number 1 somewhere else. He was the number 1 for the 49ers in 2021. That was a good offense. It was him and Deebo Samuel carrying for San Francisco all the way into the playoffs to the NFC Championship game. Being Butterfly wants to see Brock Purdy command the offense with more authority. He's entering year 3. He's earned the right to take the reins off the offense. I want Brock Purdy to hold players accountable. Well, we'll see. I think Brock is from game 1. He told George Kittle to shut up in the huddle when George was goofing off. So as far as accountability and leadership goes, I think Brock Purdy's a natural. Well, will he be a little bit more vocal? Yes. Yesterday, I talked about it with Brad on the show. I think that just naturally, given the resume that he's put up, MVP finalist, he's got a year and a half under his belt as the starter now. All that success and all those games mean that just naturally his teammates are going to respond to him more as this central leadership figure. It's just something that you earn with time. I don't necessarily think he's going to be out there yelling at people and carrying a different demeanor because that's all fake leadership. Leadership comes from following by example, typically. And Purdy's example has been awesome so far. We've heard about the shut up to George Kittle in the huddle. So we know that he talks when he has to. So maybe there'll be a little bit more gravitas, a little bit more weight behind what he does. But I don't think you're going to see a massive personality change from Brock Purdy moving forward. What he's doing so far is working really well. So all you can continue to do is enhance it. Will we see Deebo Samuel running out of the backfield less or more in 2024? Well, we'll never see more than 2021 unless the 49ers have a huge injury rash at running back. He didn't do it all too much last year. I think the alignment of Deebo Samuel in the backfield, along with a few carries a year, especially at the start, is all it takes to get defenses thinking about that and have to account for it. And then Deebo can run a lot of pass patterns. So many times it's not about the actual act of running the football as a receiver or catching the football as a running back. It's about the threat of being able to do so. That's what compromises the defense. They have to take advantage of it before the snap. And that's what opens up whatever that player is best at, whatever that player does most. Did Drake Nugent get a good amount of reps at OTAs and mini camps? What's the outlook for him starting or being able to rotate during games? Guys, he's a rookie. It's center, and that's where he's going to have to play because he's undersized at that center position. It's going to take a lot of learning. The chances of Nugent cracking that lineup in his rookie year aren't very high. Is it possible? Of course it is. But, and the reason why it would be possible is because he's an all Big Ten center coming off of a 15-0 national championship season. That's a hell of a resume for college, but it's still the NFL. Still an undrafted guy. He's undrafted probably because of his size. So he's going to have to make up for it with his mental command of the game. And that may take a little while to cultivate. Whatever we saw or didn't see in OTAs is largely irrelevant, especially for offensive linemen. They don't even have pads on. So for linemen, it's hand-to-hand combat on every single down. You got to have the pads on before we know anything. And at this point, the 49ers don't know enough to move Drake Nugent up in the pecking order. He's going to have to prove that at camp. What position battle am I most excited to watch play out in camp? I think that every single position has something fun going on, and I could go through them right now. We can go back to the roster here. From quarterback, the Dobbs, Brandon Allen thing. Can Tanner Mordecai find a way to keep himself in the building? To running back, which we've been talking about a bit here. That one could lead to a trade down the road if the 49ers are impressed enough outside Elijah Mitchell, Garendo, Cody Schrader, Patrick Taylor Jr. Don't sleep on him. Obviously, Jordan Mason. Receiver, fascinating stuff. I mean, Danny Gray has a chance to save his tenure with the 49ers. Somebody like Trent Taylor's back in the building. What about Ronnie Bell entering year number 2? So interesting stuff at receiver. Tight end, fascinating. Kamla too. What does he have? What does somebody like Mason Pline have? We know about Logan Thomas and Eric Saubert. Those guys are veterans, but the youngsters are going to try to use that veteran competition to make the football team. O-line, I've been talking about here for the last several minutes. Defensive line, I don't think that we'll see Drake Jackson back yet by camp, but somebody like Kalia Davis, can he force his way into the rotation? Big proving grounds for him. Evan Anderson, Shaquille Brown, names like that. Robert Beal Jr. did a whole video on him this week. Linebacker, Tatum Bethune, can he force his way onto the 49ers 53-man roster? Hard hitter at Florida State as guys are trying to line up behind Fred Warner. Who can get that job behind Warner? Devondre Campbell's the favorite, but the 49ers have a lot of younger players who are also potentially capable. And then this is the deepest cornerback room that they've had under Shanahan and Lynch. I've talked a lot about that. The safety room, not as deep. Maybe they still add somebody, but I can't wait to see Malik Mustafa. Looking forward to Talanoa Hufanga returning from his ACL. Well, thank you. This is awesome. Yesterday's show with Brad was the best 49ers show I've given my time to since I started following the 49ers. You two complement each other perfectly. Let's make sure that Brad sees that. Brad's a great guy. It was a lot of fun to do the show with him yesterday. So we'll let him know, and maybe we'll be back on with Brad at some point this summer and then into the regular season. Brock Purdy has added some strength. I did a whole show about how jacked Brock Purdy looked a little bit earlier this offseason. It's not just that, adding muscle is not necessarily about throwing the ball further. Some of the best arms in baseball, like Randy Johnson, for example, skinny dude, right? It's about the torque in your elbow. And I know throwing a football is different than throwing a baseball, but you want to bulk up a lot of times to insulate yourself against hits, make yourself more durable. Yeah, of course, some strength can help with velocity and all that, but it's a little bit more complicated than all that. So, yes, I would say that Purdy He's looking bigger, but no, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's because he's planning to air it out over 50 yards more often. He was already really accurate downfield, and you don't really train for a 50-plus-yard throw. It's not something you do a lot in the NFL. You don't make your bread and butter off of heaving the ball on a Hail Mary. It's more about the short and the intermediate game. That's your bread and butter. So you want to become better there. You want to become better in the pocket. You want to become more durable because availability is the best ability. And I think that's the story behind Purdy adding more strength. And he's also said more agility this year. A question about Tariq Owens. He's at the very back of the roster right now. He'll have a chance to move up a little bit during training camp. But I think the ceiling for Tariq, really raw prospect, somebody, the Terrell Owens' son, obviously. He obviously didn't play football until a little bit later. He was more of a basketball player at first. I think that the practice squad is probably the ceiling for him this year, but we'll tune back in over training camp. He is wearing number 84, as Stanley says. This is awesome. I really appreciate the nice words from everybody talking about the show with Brad yesterday. And while we're here with all the nice words, why didn't everybody hit that subscribe button right now? Look, I'll even write a text title for it down at the bottom of the screen. We're trying to get to 75K before the season starts. That I think would be really neat to get to 75K. So those of you watching, there's a big crowd of you right now, 329 people. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button right now. If you're already subscribed, you can hit the little notification bell so you know whenever I am hitting the live. So far today in the daily update, we can repeat that Brock Purdy is better than Jordan Love. I can show you this. Pass protection efficiency. Look at Purdy. The pass protection hasn't been great. The efficiency has been awesome. We've talked about Atlanta getting in trouble for tampering with Kirk Cousins and former 49ers tight end Charlie Werner. And then we went to our 49ers intel regarding Dominick Puni. And the guy that we talked to for the intel, actually, I just spoke of Purdy, has some experience playing against Purdy. It's Lance Leopold, the coach of Kansas. This is an interview with Lance Leopold talking about his player, Dominick Puni, new 49ers offensive lineman. He also talked about playing against Brock Purdy. So make sure to check all that stuff out and hit that subscribe button right now as I move back to a few more questions. Yeah, Brad is a good film guy. It's awesome because he's played along the line, so he knows the technical details of playing in the trenches, which I think helps give him appreciation for the game that goes beyond what most film analysts are bringing, because most of those guys are going to be focused on the quarterback and the skill position players. But football won and lost in the trenches, it's so important. So Brad does a really good job with that. When is the next swim? TBD, coming up soon. But right now I'm actually doing some pool training. I'm working on my speed in the pool. So I've been, because I'm in Nashville right now, so I'm not doing open water. I'm swimming in just the pool, and now I'm working on intervals, and I'm working on speed, working on building a little bit of muscle. And then we'll get back in the bay once the training camp starts. And once training camp starts, it'll be cold. I'll have to reacclimate to the cold water, but we'll do some fun swims. Yeah, I think a lot of people are afraid of the sharks, but what can I say? Life is full of risk. Just depends on where you take it on. It's a good question. I don't know if I would trust swimming in lakes in Tennessee. Once you leave California, there's a lot of weird stuff in the water. There's like snakes and I wouldn't say alligators in Tennessee, but you go a little bit further south of here, you hit Florida, yeah, you might run into animals that you wouldn't want. I'm not afraid of sharks, but I do not put me in a lake with an alligator. That seems that seems a little bit more extreme to me. Yeah. I s- to me, I'd rather deal with a shark any day and punch it in between the eyes if it swims up to me than a snake. Don't. Maybe started on the snakes, that and alligators. Yeah, just don't want to deal with it. But in California, you've got a lot of swimmable lakes, which is really nice. It's a fun thought to finish on. We'll see you guys later.